Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind the scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, and let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.
Hello, filthy movie lovers. My name is Gentry Austin.
And I'm Casey Scott.
And we're the hosts of the Sin Syndicate, film podcast for something weirdos, anti-criterion bros, and Joseph Sarno aficionados. Join us semi-weekly as we peer into the adults-only theaters and sticky-floored cinemas of the golden age of sexploitation, when the morals were loose, the laws were murky, and the intercourse was all simulated. Find us now on the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
And welcome to the Kulturecast. I'm Chris Stachiw, and I am joined by field reporter and host of the Projection Booth podcast, Mr. Mike White.
I'm coming to you live on the air.
But are you coming to us live outside the Weber House in River Hills Township?
No.
Damn it. And we are rounding out Horrortober with a look at Chris LaMartina's WNUF Halloween Special.
Don't check your dial, folks. You didn't tune in to Transylvania's public access station. No, sir. Tonight is Halloween.
Halloween is Satan's night, the night of the devil.
Reporter Frank Stewart has a special Halloween treat in store for viewers tonight. He'll be leading a group of paranormal experts to the infamous Weber House.
Do you know what happened here in the Weber House?
Some people got killed. Their son went haywire.
Frank Stewart and his team of experts will conduct the first ever live-on-TV seance.
Evil works in mysterious ways, Frank. It's unpredictable.
Are there any spirits in the house?
It's scary. That's far out.
Something strange going on in this house. Animal mutilation, paranormal disturbances, devil worship. Wait, hold on. This is not staged. Hello? Is this the work of the devil? Folks, we are going where no camera crew has gone before. Father, perform the exorcism. This is not some Halloween prank. The grisly evidence of the supernatural is real. No. We'll be right back.
You're watching the WNUF Halloween Special.
The film was released in 2013. Like I mentioned, it's directed by Chris LaMartina along with some other folks who directed the commercials. And it is a found footage mock broadcast that took place in Halloween of 1987. And it features Paul Fahrenkopf as a smart alecky reporter who goes into a haunted house hoping to scare up the dead. So, Mike, I know you'd never seen this before. I am curious, however, what did you think of the WNUF Halloween Special?
I'd never seen this. I'd never even heard of this before you talked to me about this. I was like,
it's not a bad thing.
What is he talking about, WNUF Halloween Special? What is this thing?
I found it on Shudder just kind of by happenstance last year, so I've been kind of championing this film for quite a while to anyone who's like, found footage fucking sucks. I'm like, I mean, there's a lot of bad movies out there in found footage, but here are a couple good ones you should check out, including this one.
Well, then I posted that I was watching it yesterday, and my friend Skiz writes to me this morning. He's like, why are you watching WNUF? My friend Chris directed that. I was like, oh, okay. And so it's like, and then as I'm looking at some of the credits, I was like, oh, I know some of the people in here. And then other people were posting on my Facebook as well, like, oh yeah, I'm the dude with the mullet in that picture. And I'm like, wow, okay. So talk about a weird small world. Yeah, and this had completely flown under my radar. Never heard of it. And I'm very glad that you have me on this episode because I'm really glad that I watched this. This was, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's kind of the highest praise I can give it. I mean, outside of being good, is it is a lot of fun, and it also really, it reaps the benefits of what it kind of sets down. It really goes out of its way to make you feel like this is a piece of footage from the 80s. And it does a really good job of giving you that sense of time and place. And if you're familiar with kind of public broadcasting from the 80s, or even 90s, really, I mean, this is 87, so it's verging on the 90s. It has a very distinct sense of time and place, and I think that really works in the film's favor because, when you fully commit to this idea and it pays off, it really comes through on screen.
Well, yeah, it came out in 2013, was made to look like it was 1987, but it's not kitsch factor 1987. It's not Stranger Things 1987. It's not all the good stuff, the fun stuff that we remember. It's not like, hey, it's the frickin' Goonies, those kind of things. It feels so much more authentic than 1987 as interpreted by the early to mid, by 2013 standards.
What's the thing about the 80s at this point is it's kind of been overdone, and 2013 we were a little before that, but now, I mean, everything with the 80s is just fucking Stranger Things and it's like, oh my god, like, this is so played out. But like you said, I mean, this isn't that, and I think that in my mind, that's why this works so well, is because it's really tapping into something that is 80s, but not, bash you over the head, pop culture, kind of mainstay stereotype 80s.
Right. Now, I used to work at a cable station. Now, it seems like this is being set at a UHF station, so differences there rather than cable. 1987, yeah, cable was definitely around, but the way that they keep touting that this is channel 28, I just keep thinking, like we had WXON channel 20 here in Detroit, and still do somewhere on the dial. Who knows where the hell that ended up. Definitely not at channel 20 on the cable box, I'll tell you that. So it has that cheap UHF kind of thing going for it, but it was really bringing back, as far as all the commercials go, it was really bringing back my days in 94, 95, 96 working at a local origination station and helping produce some of those commercials. So it really brought a warm spot to me as far as how these commercials looked and how they were integrated into the broadcast, and then also seeing how the commercials repeat and the way that they got more risque as the night went on as well was fantastic. And I just love that there was actual thought put into that kind of stuff, and you could tell as you're watching it that somebody actually planned out a lot of this stuff.
I also like that it's in 4:3 aspect ratio.
Oh yeah.
Again, it's just, and that's the thing, and I spoke not.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Only with director Chris LaMartina, but I also spoke with Paul Fahrenkopf, who plays Frank Stewart. So I have to give them both credit for really, Paul Fahrenkopf really kind of embodying that 80s TV show kind of reporter, but at the same time, Chris LaMartina for really committing to this idea, even to the point of 4:3 aspect ratio, releasing 300 copies of it on VHS initially before it ever came out anywhere else. He just kind of self-released it all over the place, and people found it in like bargain bins and stuff. And that's crazy. And that's one of those things where it's like, this is a really smart way of releasing something like this, because, you know, while you can tell the longer it goes on that it's not real, if you found this just in a bargain bin when this originally came out, before there was any kind of online chatter about it, you might think it's real.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the way that he described it on the audio commentary, like just writing on the spine WNUF Halloween Special and hiding it in like a Goodwill shop. And it's like, wow. Okay. And you could, because you would see that. You would see people's home videos inside of Goodwill a lot of times. And it's like, I don't know who, I never was adventurous enough to pick up that. I wanted to buy some people's home movies once, but never ended up doing that. I thought that would have been a hoot. But yeah, just buying someone's used VHS taped off of TV, now I would kill for that, because I would love to see that kind of stuff. And just that it's this time capsule, and the way that they made it into a time capsule is fantastic. And I especially love the idea of them, as you're watching it, the person who's doing this like tape to tape dubbing, it looks like, that they're fast forwarding through bits of it. And that sets up an interesting angle as well, as far as what's important, what's not important. And like, you know, I kind of would have liked to have seen the weather report, but I get to see a few seconds of it. And there are a couple commercials where I would have liked to have seen more. And then I'm thinking, they shot all this stuff just to fast forward through it. It kind of reminds me, like, I just recently talked with Adam Rifkin about Director's Cut, and there's so much stuff that they fast forward through in there, and it's like, you had to shoot all this just so you could fast forward through it. And watching some of those commercials again, I was just like, wow, they went nuts with this stuff just to fast forward through these things.
Well, again, I think that, like you said, you know, it has an interesting angle that I think really is unique about the end of the film. And we'll talk spoilers kind of when we get to it, but that'll probably be the last thing we talk, because honestly, this is one of those things that's best left unexplained. You just kind of put it on, because we were having a Halloween party over the weekend, and we were all kind of hanging out, drinking, playing some board games, and I just put it on, and I mean, immediately people were drawn to it, because it's just one of those things where, I mean, this is unlike anything I've ever seen, really. I mean, there are close analogs, but it's one of those things where either you get it or you don't, but if you get it, you're drawn to it immediately, and you're hooked 2 seconds in.
Yeah, as I was watching this, I kept thinking of Ghostwatch and seeing these things as being very parallel, but at the same time, very different in the way that they're being presented. And I think that you couldn't do Ghostwatch. You know, we talked about that Ghostwatch was 92, and it was okay for the UK at that particular time. I don't think that you could have done anything like Ghostwatch in 92 over here, and definitely not in 2013 over here. So I think the best you're going to get is WNUF Halloween Special, because it plays with the medium so much.
Well, and that's, like you said, that's the thing about it. I think that this is, you know, we talked about when you were on the Ghostwatch Kulturecast, we talked about kind of how would you do that now? And I think that this is the answer to that question. How do you do something like Ghostwatch in the 21st century? And it's mimicking something from a time that people are inherently familiar with, but also doing it in a way that's slick and really forward-thinking and really smart.
Precisely, yeah. I mean, I think now the closest you're going to get is like if you put people on some sort of weird scavenger hunt going through the internet and going through like YouTube videos, and these kind of things. Like, we kind of did something like that when I was working at an advertising agency, and we were doing a tie-in from Jeep to the TV show Lost, and there was this whole thing of like figuring out, like, there was the whole there was the degrees of the compass, and we kind of turned that into the 108 as far as the numbers went when it came to the numbers on Lost. And if you went to this particular website and you clicked at 108 degrees, and it allowed you entrance into this, and it just was one backdoor after another, to the point where one of my coworkers accidentally left his own email address inside of one of the test things that they were doing for this site, and he ended up starting to get emails from these rabid Lost fans just like, well, what is this, and what does this mean, and what does this mean? And luckily for him, he's an author, and his book actually saw a little bump in sales because people were thinking, oh, there's clues inside of his books.
Well, yeah, I mean, this idea of kind of hiding these tapes in the real world does have a very, like, ARG feel to it. Like, what they did with kind of Cloverfield and Batman, or there was The Dark Knight that did that, I think. They did kind of an ARG thing. But I would say this is better than both of those movies combined. And that's the thing is, like we've been talking about, like, fully committing to this idea is the only way that this works. I mean, I have sitting on my shelf one of the VHSs. I went out of my way to buy it. It wasn't cheap, and I'm glad I bought it because there's only one of 300 that exist. And I mean, if I handed it to someone, they would be like, how old is this fucking thing? But I mean, it's only from like 5 years ago. But again, it's going the distance to sell the idea completely really pays off, and it pays off with the community of people that watched and loved this movie. Chris LaMartina is working on a sequel right now. He's looking for funding, and if you go on Twitter, some notable folks that have been really kind of vocal about it are your buddy over at Red Letter Media that you've had on your podcast a couple times,
Jay Bowman.
Yeah, and then Henry Zabrowski from the Last Podcast on the Left, one of the internet's top listened to podcasts in, period, was retweeting about it. So, I mean, it's hitting the right notes for the right folks, and these...
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
Folks are the ones that are really excited and want something and needed something like this. And again, I think that's a testament to what Chris created with this film, is that it's just, he somehow managed to find every right person who would be in this that committed to it and understood exactly what they needed to give to the performance, down to even, the actor and actress who play the news anchors, who are kind of only in the first third of the film, and they completely get it. Then you've got the really awkward producer in the van thing, and it's like everything about this just works, and it's like it's almost kind of a miracle that it works so well, because it really could have stumbled and been just kind of one note.
Oh yeah, the producer in the van, Deborah, she was fantastic. That caught deer in the headlights look that she gives so often, and then those crazy... Wait, no. Was it Deborah in the van?
No, it's Veronica Stanzi.
Veronica, thank you. And she's got that look on her face, and those freaking eyebrows, man. Those are amazing.
Yeah, the part where she's like, we need to cut to commercial. Let's play this part with Dr. Stanley Allen's Kids for Candy tradeback thing, and then she gives the most awkward smile.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
But it's great because, again, it gives you the sense and time and place and exactly what you would expect if this were real.
Exactly, and playing the exact clip that we saw earlier in the footage was fantastic. I was so happy about that, because that's exactly what you do. You have something that's already been played, that's just kind of still there in the machine, and you can go to it easily because you have no freaking idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's very kind of Geraldo in the Vault-esque. It's kind of that, it's a little bit exploitative. What Frank Stewart is kind of on scene at the Weber household to do is very Geraldo in the Vault, similar to Ghostwatch, obviously, right? I mean, and that's kind of, it shares its DNA with Ghostwatch, but again, Ghostwatch is one of the best things I've watched all month, and again, it's in the top 5, top 3, top 2 found footage reality horror films that I can think of. And that's because it does really get it right when it comes to giving you something that's not only interesting but also convincing. And I'm not sure how important being convincing is in reality, but in my mind, if you're going to do this, you have to be convincing. Even if it's like, well, we know this is fake, but at least it's convincing.
The one thing that we didn't talk about when we talked about Ghostwatch was the scene of the daughter knocking on the walls and kind of being a fake inside of the middle of this haunting. And it's like, well, was all of it fake? Probably not, but what elements were fake? And that really comes into play in WNUF even more, which I think is very clever, that it's like so many of the things that happen off screen. So it's like, well, how much of this stuff is real? How much of it, what is haunting? What ends up being the twist of the movie later on? And when is all fakery based on the part of this news, quote unquote, news station? What part of these broadcasts are being manipulated by the people that are actually producing them?
Well, and that's the thing that I asked Chris about, and you'll hear me ask him about it in the interview. And I always got the sense, and I'd be curious your interpretation, that the house is haunted, but at the same time, when the Burgers are talking about the bad spirits in the house, she's unknowingly talking about just the twist that ends up happening at the end. She's unknowingly talking about what ends up happening, as opposed to talking about entities. But in my mind, there are entities as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there could be. I mean, that's the thing that I like about it is we don't know.
Right. And that's what makes it fun. And you could also go the route of, is Frank Stewart in on this? Because obviously towards the end, there's kind of another revelation about one other kind of aspect of the film, and he's in on that. So the question is, how much was he in on? How much is he not in on? And again, like you said, similarly to Ghostwatch, it's like a hoax within a hoax.
Right. Right. How much of a Geraldo is this guy? How much does he want these ratings? And I love that he's such a salty character, just because I didn't get that at first when I was watching it. And then after a while, I was like, wow, this guy is really cynical. Like at first I thought it was that kind of like jokey kind of thing, but then I noticed that he was biting a little too hard on that stuff. And I was just like, oh, okay. And he's not in the newsroom. He's out in the field. It's freaking cold. He is not happy about this. This is not his moment to shine. He is not happy about having to do this segment, which makes it even nicer. And yeah, the Paul Fahrenkopf plays it so well, because I think we all have newsmen like this in our local news chapters, and he just hits all of those things.
He's the one that got passed over for the promotion to the main desk.
Exactly.
And so now he's just the schmuck out in the field doing, the fluff personality pieces about the woman who has the biggest bell pepper in the county or something like that.
Right.
And this is kind of just a lark just like that. But obviously it ends up, he ends up getting embroiled in something that is clearly not a lark, and ends up being really kind of, the end of the movie is pretty rough.
Oh yeah.
But let's take a quick break. We'll play the interview that I did with Chris LaMartina, the director, and then we'll play the interview I did with Paul Fahrenkopf, who played Frank Stewart, play some commercials in between them, and when we get back, we'll finish up talking about the film. What was your inspiration for creating the WNUF Halloween Special?
So it started, it's sort of funny. We've done, I think, 8 features now. And back when we were doing WNUF, it was the first summer in like a year or 2 years that we weren't making a horror comedy. And I kept thinking, like, man, like, I really want to do another horror movie this year, but I just don't know how I'm going to do one fast. And I started toying around with the idea of doing a found footage movie. I had worked on this film that Ed Sanchez, the Blair Witch co-creator, had made called Lovely Molly, and I was shooting a lot of content, producing a lot of content for their social media campaign, and they were sort of like the guys that created what they call transmedia, like story extension, and I fell in love with this idea of world building, and I started thinking about how they did that, and then I was thinking about how to make a feature very fast, and I kept thinking, like, a found footage movie makes the most sense, right? And I started thinking about, like, what would it mean for me to make a found footage movie, knowing that I really don't like many found footage movies. And
you won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times, or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months, or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
Hello and welcome to Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys. My name is Hunter. In this podcast, I'll be joined by a different guest each week to discuss a classic Western movie or TV show. I've been a fan of classic Westerns for as long as I can remember, and in recent years, they've become very nostalgic for me. I love the aesthetic, the tropes, and I love seeing different filmmakers' takes on them. At their best, they're incredibly entertaining, rewatchable, and some of my all-time favorite movies are Westerns. We'll mostly focus on Western movies made in Hollywood, but we'll also be covering spaghetti Westerns, and one thing I'm very excited to get into are Western TV shows. I've got some amazing guests coming on the show, film professors, historians, and podcasters. And Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys is part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, and many guests on the show will be from other shows on the network. Thanks for listening.
And I wrote a list of all the things that I hated about found footage movies, just to sort of like use that as a jumping off point. Like, how will I do that differently, right?
So I'm curious, what are the things you hate about found footage movies?
I will tell you.
Please do, because I'm assuming your list is probably very close to what mine is.
Yeah. So we'll start with the idea of there were 3 ones, right? 3 big ones that stick out. One, found footage for me always kind of screwed with my head because there has to be a believability into how someone is finding this movie, right? Like, the second you buy a DVD at a store with a UPC code on the back of the box, it's not really found footage. It's already ruined for you. I mean, obviously you can buy into the conceit of the story, but like the discovery and the format was very important to me. So that was something that stuck in the back of my head. 2, the idea of so many found footage movies, as you're watching them, that you're like, why is this filmmaker still filming despite all this crazy stuff happening, right? Yes, like literally it's one of those things where it's like, if somebody dies or some messed up thing happens, there's no reason why you'd keep filming if you were a normal human being. And then the third thing for me was, it was always sort of, while I'd love to make what I would consider a bottle movie, like one location, that's what typically gets me bored. Like, I have a short attention span, and I have it would drive me nuts when it was just a found footage movie where one location, 3 actors, and it's just like mostly just like them running and screaming or crying or things like that. And so I wrote this list, and I started thinking about stuff, and I grew up, making a bunch of horror movies. I've been making short films since I was like 11, and I worked in local television for a while. So I was always attracted to sort of really bad local TV. Like, there's something about it that reminded me almost of like, I love seeing what people do with limited resources, like almost like the video equivalent or the filmmaking equivalent of like punk rock, where like, oh, I love what people do with, the video equivalent of 3 chords, right? So I started thinking about that, and I started thinking about these questions I had, or my problems I had with found footage. And I started thinking first and foremost, okay, like, why does someone stop? Well, actually, let me backtrack for a second. Okay. I at the same time, there was this a resurgence of VHS culture was just starting. Like, everybody was like talking about video again, shot on video movies, things being released only on VHS. Like, this is just when this was starting to happen, and I thought that was really cool. At the same time, people were making all these 1980s horror movie parodies, but they weren't getting the aesthetic right. Like, it was too jokey, and that sort of broke my heart because I legitimately love shot on video movies, and I legitimately love, like, local TV. It's not just I'm making fun of them. I love that stuff, right? So I started thinking about this. This was all sort of gestating at that point. And I thought about, like, okay, the conceit of a found footage movie. Why is this person filming, right? And I thought, okay, what if they keep filming because they have to keep filming? Because if they stop filming, there's nothing to show on TV. And if there's nothing to show on TV, you don't have ads, like revenue, and you lose your job, right? So people are literally filming because that's their livelihood. It's part of, like, they have to film. They have to film or they lose their job, right? So that was the first answer to that question. The second answer to that question was, and this is something a lot of people don't like about WNUF. It's my favorite part of the movie, to be honest with you. I thought about the idea of breaking up the monotony and making sort of a larger universe. Well, I thought if I made it as if somebody actually taped this off of TV, there would have to be commercials. And I didn't want to do what I've seen where somebody puts, like, one commercial in and it's just a cute little nod. If this was going to really be believably, or at least believably enough, a found footage movie, I would have to make 30 minutes of commercials. And I haven't done the actual number count, but, like, there's definitely at least 20 minutes of commercials in that movie, in an 82-minute movie. So, like, I did that to break up the story, to introduce a larger universe. Like, you have stories that exist in the film, like the guy running for, governor, or the two guys running for governor. You have the dentist that comes back in different package segments. We did that because it was about creating mythology. And then finally, the third thing was the idea of how can you see this movie. When we first released WNUF, it was only available on VHS for the first 3 months it was available. You could only get it on VHS. And when you bought it, it was literally, you would get a VHS tape with a handwritten spine label that says WNUF Halloween Special. Before we signed the distribution agreement, my then girlfriend and I, now wife, we drove around. I mean, we left VHS copies of the movie at thrift stores. We went to horror conventions and left copies of the tape in bathrooms. The goal was to have somebody stumble across this and find it and be like, what the hell is this crazy movie? Is this real? My favorite story in regard to that is some kids I knew in Ohio, and this is really funny. The only reason why they figured this out was because one of the kids actually knew me through the punk scene. My buddy Pat lived in this house with some punks, and some kid was like, I found this tape in the basement. It's just labeled WNUF Halloween Special, and he puts it on, and everybody thinks it's legitimately from the 80s, and it wasn't about 5 minutes into the movie before they realized, oh my God, I know the guys that made this. So, like, that's my ideal way for someone to find the movie. Someone thinking it's real.
I think that's one of the things about it that works for me the most is the kind of punk rock aspect to it. Mm-hmm. And the way you distributed it. Mm-hmm. I actually own one of the copies of the VHS. So.
I know, that's incredible.
Yeah, let me put it this way. I definitely spent some money on it to get it. But I was the only one I've ever seen on eBay, and
yeah,
I own it. Now I just have to, one of my buddies was giving me a hard time. Now I have to go track down a VCR to watch it.
That's so funny, man. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm one of the 300 lucky people who owns it on VHS.
Well, and it's funny too, man, what you just said about having to get a VCR to watch it. I had a review probably the first couple months we released it where somebody said, I had to dust off my VCR. I had to go in my closet, dust off my VCR, plug it in, and it was sort of like, I think their full quote was, WNUF is not so much a movie as it is an experience. And I think that's something that's really important to say because, a lot of movies don't stand out that uniquely like that. Like, there's plenty of slasher movies where they're great movies, but it's pretty formulaic. I mean, there's very few things like WNUF. I think in recent years, was it Dude Bro Party Massacre? That came out and has a similar, it's way more jokey, but it has commercials.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue, heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Commercials, but we were the first. And you know, it's I like that part about the story. It's truly, whether you like it or you hate it, it's definitely unique.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. I mean, I ended up watching it first on Shudder.
Okay,
and I went out of my way to buy the WNUF VHS, the proper way to watch it.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Like I said, I still haven't watched it on VHS, so I can't speak to that from a viewer standpoint. But seems like everyone who's watched it on VHS kind of comes to the same conclusion. So I'm kind of curious. You know, you went out of your way to make it, you know, on vintage tape stock.
Yeah.
Doing all this on VHS. In your mind, you know, was it worth it in the finished product?
Oh, without a doubt. Let me clarify this. I have never had more fun making a movie than we did when we made WNUF. One thing that's really interesting is, like, obviously now everybody shoots on HD or 4K or whatever. It's like a 16:9 image. But I grew up making movies 4:3 aspect ratio, right? Like when I first started making movies, my family camcorder was like a VHS-C JVC camcorder. And there was sort of this weird romantic element to when we shot the movie. I'd be like, oh, I turned on the camera thinking I was going to frame for a rectangle image, right? But no, it's a square. And that was fun. But also, it was fun to, like, there's moments when, like, you know, someone's performance is a little awkward and it's perfect, you know? Like, it's sort of, I wanted people to be earnest and sincere in what they were doing, but I didn't want them to be over the top unless their character themselves were over the top. And it was very liberating in that regard.
I kind of want to ask you more about that, because all the commercials were done by friends of yours, people that you know, I'm assuming?
So it's kind of funny. There's about, I want to say 3 to 5 people who did commercials. It's not, and I don't want to get this wrong. Like, I can go down the list. Like, my buddy Scott made King of Castle Lane. My friend Lonnie made the second you see of the Mouse commercial. My buddy Jim Branscombe made the Parents Against Partying. But a lot of those commercials were me. Or I had some hand in them. My buddy Scott Jones made the Phil's Carpet Warehouse. He is Phil. And then, like, I edited a lot of commercials myself, but the writing was mixed up on the commercial. Like, I had about 4 or 5 writers helping me craft that stuff. Like, I actually would have people come over to my house. We'd go through footage I had shot that I was trying to figure out some stuff for, or royalty-free stock footage video that we had, or public domain video, and we'd write content to that. Like, I'd sort of say, I have this footage, I'd like to do a 80s sci-fi kids show. And then, you know, my buddy Pat Stork wrote a bunch of them, and he came with Galaxy Pilot. But it was very collaborative, and I think that's the point. Like, I wanted it to be collaborative. Like, I didn't want it to just be like, I knew that if I wrote everything myself, it would start feeling like one person wrote everything, you know? But yeah, I mean, I will say this without being like a control freak, because I don't want that to come off this way. I definitely had my hand in the majority of what ends up in the movie.
Well, hey man, it's your baby.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, no.
It's your baby, man. You got to make sure it's turns out the way you want it, because otherwise it's not. No, I completely understand. So the end of the film is, I think, one of the more unique aspects of it, because it subverts the expectations of the found footage genre. Like you talked about at the beginning, how do you find the found footage is one of the big questions. So kind of walk me through how you kind of came to the ending in the version that's in the film, and why that was important to get it in such a unique and really distinct way.
Sure. So, fair enough. And I'm going to try to do this without totally blowing the ending if somebody discovers the movie through this way. So, first and foremost, I think by the 10-minute mark, if not sooner, you realize the movie is obviously fake. I don't think anyone's going to watch that movie and think it's real, obviously. But for the first couple minutes, it sort of like gets you in that universe, and it's like, all right, we're in this universe, and this is the aesthetic. This is the sort of the other dimension 1987, right? But the ending itself was, for me, the movie thematically had a lot to do with perception of reality. Like, is this 1987 or is this 2013, right? Are these ghosts or is this something else? Like, the idea of, even the idea with the priest character, when you see the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about, when he sort of has this sort of like third act reveal about who he is. There's things there where it's really about like what media in the 1980s was, and I think media today still too, like what you're projecting in media versus what the actuality of something is, right? And I think I'll leave it there without going too crazy, but I will say about the idea of the tape, I think when at that point in the movie, when you're watching the tape, you're not just watching anybody's tape. You're watching the tape of somebody that, taped over something at the end. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and again, that for me is what makes the ending such kind of it's so unique and interesting, is that it really does go out of its way, and you went out of your way to make it kind of a gut punch at the ending.
I think gut punch
as opposed to just leaving.
Yeah, I think a gut punch is a good way to describe that, because let's be honest, tonally, and I still stand, it's a horror comedy, right? But that is a very serious scene before you go to the epilogue. Epilogue in quotation marks, because it's all sort of weird. But it's it's I wanted to, tone is this funny thing where like horror comedy, so often tone is dangerous, because it's like, when are you supposed to be laughing? When are you supposed to be scared? And there's certain, I don't think WNUF is a scary movie by any means, but I do like the idea of someone not knowing really how to react in certain moments. I mean, like when we, when a certain pet dies, it's like, oh, that's not a funny moment, Yeah.
Well, and that's kind of the other thing that you mentioned when you're talking about the tone of the film. It is very much a horror comedy, but I think because of the way it ends, I think it puts some of what was going on in the film into perspective. And the second time you watch it, because I've seen it, my God, I don't even know how many times at this point. It really kind of, the ending is more of a catalyst for the rest of the film the second or third time you watch it, because you're able to pick up on what is going on more in the film.
No, and that makes total sense what you're saying there. I mean, it's also just interesting to think about the idea of like, what you want to believe and what you want to believe in, right? I mean, like I'm not, I didn't expect to talk about like beliefs in this conversation, but like, there's certain things where as a horror fan, I would love to believe in certain things, but I know they're not real, or I've yet to see convincing proof of it. But it's so funny. I mean, like so much of media is posturing and presenting yourself in a way that it could be real, it could be genuine, it could be authentic. And I think the shining moments of WNUF are something is authentic in its awkwardness, or something is authentic in the fact that you can see the strings, or you can see, you know what I mean? Like it's sort of this moment where you become, it's sincere without being it's sincere and not self-aware.
Right. Well, and I also think, again, for someone who's seen it only once and it's their first time going through it, when you watch it the first time, I didn't expect certain aspects of kind of the interstitials and the non kind of goings on at the house to come into play.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is that's another really successful misdirection on your part.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, and it's and we wanted to have fun with that. Like in my head when we made the movie, I wanted. It's really funny. There's so much in the movie that in my head, I believe like, oh, I know who did this. I know what happened there. I know why this character is motivated to do this thing, but it's not in the movie. But in my head, I have that backstory, because that understanding of these characters as real people, as if they were making a local special in 1987, had to be there in order to get the right ambiance. Like there's moments where I'm like, okay, well, in my head, I think Frank Stewart broke their recording gear, because he hired an intern to do it, right? Because he wanted to get that moment. So there's things in my head where it's like I want to screw with motivations to sort of have some of those story beats.
Well, and again, I think that's one of the most successful things about the film is that kind of sowing the seeds of distrust with the people that are in the house. Right. Because, like you said, I mean, there's no way of knowing really when you're watching it the first time what really is going on until that kicker right at the end.
No, I appreciate that, man. Yeah, and I'm assuming just because we've been talking about it, you're probably going to give a little bit of explanation of what the movie's about before our interview starts, right?
As someone who's made a found footage film, that the found footage subgenre is kind of like a dirty word in a way.
It's funny. I feel like found footage is something that almost has become like how people talked about slasher movies in the 1980s. Like, you're going to see some great ones, but you're already apprehensive because so many filmmakers realized they could make a movie easily and get people to watch it. So you sort of keep them at arm's length because, oh man, somebody just shat out a movie, I mean, like
that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, because people know, I can shoot a found footage movie in 2 days, right? I mean, honestly, I think we probably did the most like ass backwards way of making a found footage movie. I mean, even though it only took us, I think, God, I can't remember how many shooting days it was. I think it was less than 10 shooting days, but then it was like at least principal days. But then it was months and months of editing, right? Because we were doing all these commercials. But I was going to say, I mean, like most found footage movies, you could do you could do a found footage movie in 6 hours if you have your shit together, right? And I think that's dangerous because a lot of people, I mean, that's the problem with the horror genre in general. Business people, and I should say business people in quotation marks, see, horror film is the most profitable genre. I'm just going to like make a bullshit like Killer in a House movie for $2,000 and then I'll put it on VOD. And that's I think that's upsetting, and I think found footage is the easiest way of doing an easy, and I say easy again in quotation marks, easy genre. Horror is the most accessible genre to make your investment back as a filmmaker. Which is also ironic because, I don't make my living making horror movies. I mean, WNUF, without saying numbers, I'll say them off the podcast, but like, it hasn't been a very insanely profitable movie compared to the number of people who have seen it. At the same time, I'll go to a bar at a horror convention, and I'll tell somebody I made it, and then they'll pay for my tab for the rest of the night, like just because they know the movie. It's just kind of weird. Like, I didn't make it to make money. I did it because I just wanted to make a fun, weird horror movie. And I think that's the thing that's the most important part about it.
Well, and again, I mean, unlike something like, say, the Poughkeepsie tapes, where it was made in a studio setting, and it essentially languished in development or release hell for like over a decade.
Well, it's really funny, man. You bring up Poughkeepsie. I just saw that because I'm developing this other project. I've been developing it for like 3 years now, and somebody finally mentioned, you should check out the Poughkeepsie tapes, and I finally watched it, and I'm really glad I did because watching it was like, wow, these are all the things I don't want to do with this project I'm developing. Because Poughkeepsie tapes, look, I mean, it's an interesting idea, but there's so many moments where you're like, this is not believable at all. So,
hating on the Poughkeepsie tapes.
I mean, look, don't get me wrong, dude. It's a cool idea.
But I understand where you're coming from, though, completely. Well, because I think it comes back to this interesting conversation about what is found footage and what is faux documentary, because there are things that kind of toe the line, and I would even, say to some extent that WNUF it's a mix. I mean, it's not completely found footage; it's kind of a mix of the two.
I think that's correct. I think and also I think the question remains too is a broader discussion of what is found footage. I mean, like, could you make a movie that is straight up a movie that's supposed to be from the 1980s and call that found footage? I mean, what does found footage even mean? Like, you could mean anything you find is footage you found. Which, let's not get too silly there, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, found footage is as a film, as a film critic, I would say found footage is you have a camera and it's in the environment, and it's the conceit that someone is filming and that person is taking part in the actions, not as just an observer like a normal director. That's normally what found footage is in my mind.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think then I also start thinking about, and I guess this still falls on your definition. I mean, I think about something like Unfriended, or I just saw this movie, what was the title? Live Scream. This is something that you actually might be interested in, especially since you do like video game stuff as well. It's supposed to be like a horror role-playing game, and it's a screen capture of someone playing this horror game. I saw that at Genre Blast Film Festival, and that was it was a pretty unique, interesting movie. So, I mean, I think about stuff like that where the found footage genre, there are so many new stories that could be told that way, that it's that I will give something a shot if it seems unique. You know,
we're doing only found footage movies.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times, or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months, or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the 3 hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster. You know, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week, and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
But the thing I wanted to stay away from was found footage movies that are kind of the ones that everybody kind of points a finger at and says, that's a found footage movie. Right. Like the mainstream ones. Like, I'm not going to do Paranormal Activity because I don't want to shit on Paranormal Activity, but that movie's not very good. I'm sorry. It's kind of scary the first time
I saw that on Halloween night, whenever year that came out, and I enjoyed it. But there were definitely moments and I think the found footage part of it is it's passable. There's editing in there that I'm like, I guess someone edited this, right? But I do think the only reason why that one didn't work for me was because there were certain actors that the performance took me out of the movie. Like, they felt too actorly. But I think that movie is pretty good for what it is. Obviously, my favorite found footage movie, and I would say this without even being friends with the director, because I did when I met him is years after I'd seen it. I still think Blair Witch Project is like the best found footage movie.
I like Blair Witch a lot. I don't know if Blair Witch I think it's aged okay. There's parts of it that don't work. For me, my favorite found footage, and again, it's a question of what do we consider found footage, because I really like Ghostwatch from the 90s. See,
it's so funny, man. Everyone always compares WNUF to that, and I didn't watch that.
Really?
Like, dude, yes. Isn't that insane?
They're both on... is it because they're both on Shudder? Is that why? Because they're both on Shudder.
I'll never forget, somebody told me this recently. I didn't know this. So, Adam Green has a podcast, right? He's a Hatchet guy, and somebody asked him about if he'd seen WNUF, and he goes, "Oh, is that the movie that ripped off Ghostwatch?" And I was kind of heartbroken by that, because it's like, dude, like, if somebody is listening to this, man, this is the worst thing to ever say on a podcast. If somebody's listening to this and you legitimately can't buy my movie, I don't care if you watch it for free or if you watch it at a friend's house. I make movies because I like telling stories, right? The film I made after WNUF, Call Girls Cthulhu, dude, that was torrented by like thousands of people before it was even released. Like, we got screwed, and the distributor got screwed. WNUF, I know thousands of people have seen it, and it hasn't made real money for me. But I don't care, because, like, I don't know, man. I think it's cool to even look. I made a movie that people watch every October, and probably will do that every October. Some people for their whole lives. That's beautiful to me. I mean, I made a movie for $1,500 that people watch every year in October. That's living the dream, dude. Like, I don't know.
I'm with you. I mean, I went out of my way to buy it on VHS, man. Like, I don't, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, as far as I'm concerned, on your end, like, anytime anyone says something to that effect to you, I'm sure it's just like the best thing ever.
It's a cool feeling, and I mean, like, there's so many interesting parts of it. We'll come back to this in a second, but I do want to say, people compare us to Ghostwatch, and I didn't see Ghostwatch while we were making it. And then I just watched it 2 years ago, and I'm going to be honest with you, while I think it's a really neat idea, and it's sort of like Orson Welles' War of the Worlds style, I still think, like, I didn't finish it. Like, and I know that sounds kind of crappy, but like, I watched it, I was like, oh, this is a cool idea, but I kind of lost interest in it because I felt like it took too long to get going. And I think that's, that is what it is. And I do think it's unique and cool, but it just wasn't the movie for me. But I will say this, the other thing that's really cool about WNUF is like, there's, the thing that always gets me is my wife, as I was finishing up editing, she was my, girlfriend while we were making. She's the Call Girl of Cthulhu. If anyone listening has ever seen Call Girl of Cthulhu, that's how we met making that movie. But she was the mom in King of Castle Lane, the sitcom, and I didn't know her yet. Like my friend Scott made that one, like literally just handed me over a file, and I think I like might have changed, like added a title to it to tighten it up. But like, so my future wife was in WNUF, and I hadn't met her yet, which I think is incredible, right? Like that's just sort of like a weird story to that, to the making of that film, right? It was meant to be.
It's a lot of synchronicity, right? Just kind of worked out that way, yeah. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about the found footage genre, and we've talked about your film. So I'm curious because you mentioned already kind of doing the, like, I guess what it's considered like a whisper campaign, you know, kind of taking the VHSs and leaving them, really kind of seeding the movie out into the public, but doing it in a way that's less noticeable or less publicized. How successful was that in drumming up interest in the film?
So it's interesting, and I will respond to your question by going in an odd direction. When we shot WNUF, I kept thinking to myself, and we had made God, was 5 features before that. This movie President's Day and this movie Witch's Brew, and nobody really gave a shit. I mean, we would play like a dozen festivals, and like, you know, some people found President's Day and thought it was cool, and nobody really reacted too much to Witch's Brew. And, you know, we spent a lot of time, and I just kept thinking, like, dude, if I'm going to make a movie where nobody really cares, I'm going to do the thing I really, really, really want to make. And I kept thinking about the idea of shooting a movie all on standard definition footage and how much I love that. I mean, you know, I don't know, you know, how hip you are to the filmmaking community, but that was the point where everybody was saying, like, oh my gosh, man, he shot that movie on a red camera. He shot that movie 4K. And I kept thinking, like, I don't care what fucking format or what camera you shot your movie on. Like, I care about the story and I care about the idea. So the idea that we're shooting a movie on VHS tapes while everyone else was, like, upgrading the resolution was, like, the funniest thing to me. And it was sort of like this, like, punk rock fuck you to it. And it was appropriate. But I remember when we set out to make the movie, I was like, you know, nobody's crazy enough to make this movie this way. And that was sort of the answer. Like, we were those crazy nobodies. We had nothing to lose. And that idea of having nothing to lose was great. I think as a filmmaker, expectation becomes your enemy. What people expect from you, or when people expect something from you, that's when it really, truly endangers your role as an artist. Like, I mean, you think about John Carpenter or somebody like that now, right? John Carpenter is not just making his next movie. He's making the next John Carpenter movie. And every time you go to see one of his films, you're going to compare it to The Fog, you're compare it to The Thing, you're compare it to Halloween, because that's built up in your head. And we didn't have that. We literally I got to make something that was just like a kid in a candy store. I'm going to do whatever I want. And if you don't like it, that's cool. I didn't make it for you. But obviously it found its audience because people realized I was that in love with the material. And to answer your question originally, when we didn't know if people were going to find these tapes, right? For all I knew, you know, like if I put that tape in the Hark I mentioned bathroom and a janitor came in and threw it in the garbage, that's possible. I mean, maybe the weeks I spent dubbing VHS tapes VCR to VCR, maybe that was in vain. I don't know. But I don't think it was, because I think about growing up when I would go through the $2 bin at Woolworth, or I would find my favorite like punk rock CD in a thrift store. Those discoveries, I mean, that's why we love the horror genre. Like, you know, what's in the darkness? We don't know. And that discovery of finding that thing is the best part of the genre sometimes. So, and I think that was the mythology that sort of helped us. This movie has to exist with the Whisper campaign, right? And like, you know, I mean, like, we were really fortunate too because of the VHS research that was coming out at the time. The New York Times had done a story about shot-on-video horror films coming back, and the guy named Eric Pippenberg, he had done that story, and Pop Cinemas, who originally put out the VHS tape release, they sent a copy to Eric, and Eric covered the movie for the New York Times. And from the New York Times article, other media outlets sort of took hold of it. So, and that, you know, that we're really lucky. I mean, like, I was on NPR on a show called Here and Now that year because of that. And then, like, you know, MTV covered it, not on the TV, but online, and a couple other bigger sites that I was, like, frankly shocked. My favorite one was I did an interview with Vice, where the guy who did the interview was, I guess he was a little drunk when he saw the movie, because he talks about how for like the first 10 minutes he wasn't sure if it was real or not, and he was having like this internal monologue with himself, which I thought was incredible.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. If I had found it in a bathroom, I'm not sure I would have known if it was real or not.
Yeah, no,
right?
I'm with you. Well, and it's sort of funny. I think that idea sprung from this is the real secret sauce. Years ago, I was at a horror convention. I think it was Horror Find in Baltimore, and there was a brown box, like a brown cardboard box with a bunch of VHS tapes inside. And I was like, "What the fuck is this?" So I took one and I put it in my VCR when I got home. And it ended up being a promo for The Ring, and it was the tape in The Ring. So that was sort of like this funny thing where I was like, that sort of stuck in the back of my head. But of course, it ended with the trailer for The Ring, right? So it was a great marketing tool, but I ended up making a whole movie around that, But it's funny. It's funny that was in my subconscious. I haven't thought about that until we talked about it just now. So man, that's what I was channeling.
Well, and again, I mean, like you said, kind of really doing some world building and some world creation. Doing that, leaving those tapes really helps kind of build the mystique around it. But I mean, again, I can't give you enough praise for really going for it. Like you said, I mean, one commercial would not have cut it, right? You really had to go for it. And I think it really comes through.
Well, and I think that's what's tough. I mean, like some people, I think a lot of younger audience. I mean, like you grew up watching, TV and taping things on TV, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. There's a disconnect where some people are like, there's too many commercials, and I'm like, did you watch television as a kid? Because that's how it was. It wasn't your 5-second skip ad, man. It was like you were like, all right, I guess I'll go take a piss, or I guess I'll go like grab another soda or beer or whatever. Hopefully where people weren't children drinking beers, but you know what I mean? But it was like, it's one of those things where it's like, it had to be that way or it's not believable. And if that was the fun I had to create at the sacrifice of making a traditional feature, boo fucking who? I mean, like I didn't want to make a traditional feature.
Well, and again, I mean, if someone's complaining about the amount of commercials, my response to that is like you said, do you not watch TV now?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, again, it's further kind of reinforcing this world that this exists within. And,
yeah, for sure.
So I want to ask you a little bit about it being on Shudder, and kind of has that drummed up a lot more interest? Do you notice more people coming up to you, reaching out to you, and talking to you about it, wanting to talk to you about it since it's on Shudder?
What's weird about WNUF is it doesn't die. The sort of cult around the movie grows every year. For this month, for October, I'm going to be traveling to 4 different screenings. I'm going to be down in Raleigh for a VHS festival. I'm going to be in Lancaster, Pennsylvania for a screening, and they're showing it in DC on Halloween night. And then there's one other one that I'm forgetting. I'm being terrible. Anyway, what I was going to say was, It's weird because, people, the Shudder thing, yes, people absolutely are watching it on Shudder. But I mean, I remember for a while, people didn't know how to see it. So like people were doing things like they go on eBay and try to like find copies or torrenting it like crazy. I mean, I'll tell you this too. This is true. It might even still be up there. When we were giving away throwing the VHS tapes out the car window and in bathrooms and whatnot, we uploaded a version on Cinemageddon, the torrenting site, and my buddy Charlie posted it, and he posted it with this blurb. I said, my godmother Lulu taped this off of local TV back in the 80s. It's one of the craziest things I've ever seen. So like we encourage people to find it that way. The cool thing about Shudder is it makes it more accessible. And like I was really lucky. I was one of the Shudder Labs fellows the first year they did the Shudder Labs program. And it was pretty cool. Those people are really great folks. They're really smart curators of what horror is. And it's an honor to be part of the Shudder collection, because that is without a doubt the best streaming service for horror. Netflix has gotten awful, and Amazon isn't choosy enough.
Netflix is awful, and Amazon. The way I describe Amazon Instant Video to people is it's like the bin at Walmart.
Yeah,
you gotta have no idea what's going to be in there.
Well, and then you really have to hunt, because like I find that like the first 6 pages of Amazon's horror stuff, I'm like, okay, that's fine. Like there's a couple ones that I actually want to watch, but you have to find that one you want to watch and then see more like this, like 4 more times. You have to go down like an Amazon hole before you actually get to the stuff that you're like, oh shit, like this movie's on here, all right. Or like I remember VHS tapes I would scour video stores when I was a kid are now streaming on Amazon for free. Like, there's movies that I probably would have paid $50 for a VHS tape in like 1996 or 1997, and now I can stream them for free.
And again, like you said, I 100% agree with you. I think Shudder is the end-all, be-all for horror and horror fans, and burgeoning burgeoning, unique and original horror content, because they're making obviously their own content too,
yeah,
as well.
yeah, and I think that's only going to get better. I mean, like, that's also what's really cool with their, you know, their parent company being AMC. They've got some money that they can put toward bigger and better things, which is really neat. But yeah, man, like, that's been great. But every year, and I'll give you some advice for any filmmakers out there. You want your movie to have longevity, like true longevity. Have it centered around the holiday, because, like, President's Day, for example, even though it doesn't take place on President's Day, there's people I know that tag me in a post about President's Day every February when the holiday hits, right? WNUF Halloween Special, because it is a Halloween film, it becomes part of someone's, you know, rotation for that October, you know, movie screening series.
I think that it's like the Christmas story.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. One day there'll be a channel that just shows WNUF for 24 hours.
So I want to ask you. So we touched on it.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times, or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months, or the Rogue heat baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
A little bit already. Film has been out for 5 years now.
Yeah.
Almost 5 years. It'll be 5 years a month from yesterday. In those 5 years, you've said that you've noticed the audience has grown. How do you think it's aged in 5 years, looking back?
There's only a few things I would change looking back, and that's actually the and I can't think of them off the top of my head right now, but there's very few. It's the movie. It's most closely the film I wanted to make in all the films I've ever made. And I think part of that is because the cheapness is part of the aesthetic. Because, you know, I mean, like I'm serious. I made WNUF for $1,500. Call Girl was about $40,000 to make that. And we tried to make something way bigger, and I think there's parts where my least favorite parts of Call Girl are because we didn't have the money or the time to do it correctly, right? And I think, you know, WNUF is, when I look back at it, it feels like it's a love letter, man. Like, I made that movie because I wanted to. I don't know. I don't know if I want to phrase it that way. It's how I wanted to make it, and I think it shows that I cared about the source material very much. Like, I didn't make that movie ever thinking people were going to analyze it like that. It's like no fear of failure. Like, you know, if you don't think something's impossible, you can do it. You know.
Well, and again, I mean, for me as someone who grew up on TV and watching TV, and I mean, admit it, I didn't watch horror movies until I was 16. No, I mean, again, no problem admitting it, but I think because you're such a kind of in tune with what you wanted to do, it really shows. And again, like I said, I completely buy in to everything that goes on in the movie, and it really, like you said, it does show that you are a fan of what you are making a film about.
Well, and that means a lot, dude, because, like, you see a lot of movies where clearly the director doesn't like horror movies. Mm-hmm. I always get really kind of, like, not offended. I'm not going to say I'm offended, but I kind of feel a little hurt when I'm at, like, a film festival and one of the filmmakers says, like, oh, I really just don't like horror movies, or, like, I never was really into horror movies. And I'm not saying that person has to be into that, but the fact that they're making something without an understanding or a true appreciation for the genre, it just kind of feels like it just makes you sad.
Horror always singled out as the
question? Know, yeah, exactly. I mean, to a lot of people, it's like one step above pornography. Which is, you know, that's a whole other conversation. But, like, it's weird because I think horror is such a unique genre that you can do so many fun, imaginative things with. I mean, I think that some of the best directing in movies, period, is because they got to play with fantastic elements, sort of have fun with the idea of cinematic illusion.
Well, and a lot of really kind of, you know, vaunted directors got their start in horror on top of everything else.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And like, the cool thing about that horror, too, is you can, you know, if you make a drama about, you know, class warfare, right? It has the tendency to get heavy-handed very quick. If you do class warfare in a horror movie, like People Under the Stairs or something like that, you can have so much fun without having to be like this, like, obvious sort of, like, you know, like, brooding, serious film. And not to say there's a place for that stuff. I'm not going to say there's not. It's just like there's an elasticity and a a veneer to that stuff that makes it still escapism. No, that's true. Yeah.
Well, just think if Get Out wasn't a horror movie, right? That's what I always say. I'm like, just think if Get Out wasn't a horror movie. I'm not sure anyone would enjoy that movie as much as everyone loves Get Out.
I mean, yeah, I will say this. It would probably be, I mean, Get Out's fucking fantastic. I don't want to say anything. I think it would be powerful if it wasn't a horror film. I don't think, I mean, dude, to talk about Get Out for a second, I have never felt the electric fucking energy of an audience cheer like in the third act of that movie when the main character starts, kicking ass. Like, I mean, I was jumping up out of my fucking seat. Like, it's like, and that exists because you're sort of like, it's, oh my God, it's just like, it's just so intense. And that empathy and that sense of danger is something that truly comes from the primal urges of the horror genre.
Yeah. I'm completely with you. It's like you said, I've never understood the whole idea of distancing yourself from horror. I mean, I get it in kind of like a subconscious way because horror is unapproachable, I guess, in some respects. And there are horror movies out there that have gotten a bad rap, justly and unjustly. But at the same time, like you said, I mean, you can do so much more with the horror genre than you can with anything else. You can really explore the fantastical elements of stuff. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about the sequel.
Okay, so we are in the midst of raising money to make, as I'm calling it right now, WNUF Halloween sequel. So I'm going to be honest, I said it earlier in the interview, like, I've never had more fun making a movie than when we made WNUF. And, like, more and more as I think about it since then, I thought about how there's so many ideas and some things that I didn't get to explore that I want to explore. The idea of still creating the universe, the idea of, making fake video content from previous years. So we're raising the money to make a sequel right now, and I want to keep some of the mystique, so I'm not telling people the plot publicly. A couple people privately have heard what it's about, but very few, and I'm trying to keep that close to the vest, because my goal is to have people one day open their mailbox and get the fucking VHS tape and put it in and have a new experience like they did when they saw the original, right? The goal is to literally give them, fill up their trick-or-treat bag with a new weird movie that takes place on Halloween. So the three things I'll tell you, and this is in the Kickstarter, in the crowdsourcing video. One, it's not a remake. It's not a reboot. It is a sequel. And somebody's saying, like, how can you make a sequel to that movie? Well, it's you'll see how we do it when we do it. But it's a continuation of the universe built in WNUF. Number two, it will take place in the 1990s. It will take place in the mid-1990s. And, so it's not going to be totally like 80s style. Like, there will be some things that we explore as 90s tropes or as a lampoon of media in the 90s and what American culture was in the mid-90s. And then three, there will be a pretty sizable portion of returning characters, which I think is really exciting. Like, some minor characters, some bigger characters. But yeah, man, I mean, like, I know in my head every character that's in WNUF, I know what's happened to them, and if it's possible to put them in the sequel, they will be in the sequel. And some of the folks that you think might not be possible to be in the sequel, we're still going to find a way to put them in there. Well, I hope
so. I just want to see...
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
More of Paul Fahrenkopf. That's what he is so believably the dickhead, like, television reporter. I mean, he's a total ass, but in, like, the most, like, journalistic way, which I love.
Well, and I'll tell you about Paul Fahrenkopf. I've known him since I was like 23. He was in our film President's Day. He played a detective. And I love Paul. He's incredible. And I wrote Frank Stewart for him. I knew that he was going to play this character. And Frank Stewart's character is based off of two people. One is like obviously like well, I shouldn't say this. This is not true. This is the opinions in this podcast
only yours,
are
man.
only
They're only mine. I got you.
Yeah, it's partially, you know, Geraldo. There's definitely some, you know, going into Al Capone's vault. But then there's this Baltimore newscaster from the 80s and 90s that he was on a show. Oh man, I got to be careful what I do this with. Just one day he'll find this out. Long story short, this guy clearly resented the fact that other people were moving up the ladder in Baltimore media, and he sort of stayed stuck in local TV. So there's certain moments where I channeled that character, and I remember sending links of this guy's news show to Paul to be like, hey, try to like sort of be like that a little bit. But obviously Paul's way more charming. And when Paul auditioned for the movie, and he knows this, we've talked about this, he was not good. And I was like, Paul, and he called me, he's like, Chris, I blew it. Like, I'm really sorry. Like, and I was like, Paul, I wrote this movie for you. Like, and if I love a character, like if I love an actor and they become family, I will literally tell them, hey, what's the right role you want to play? I will write a movie for you. And then if the stars line, we'll make it. So Paul sort of like blew his audition, and I told him, I was like, come back, be arrogant, be smug, do this audition like you know you have the role, like you know I wrote it for you, and do it that cocky and arrogant, but do it in a cool way. And he came back and he had the second shot and he got it. Like he finally got it. He was just like, but he at first I think he was just going to say, hey Chris, I blew it. This isn't the right role, and I didn't want him to. And you know, Paul's he's an incredible man, really sweet, warm guy. He's not like Frank at all. I mean, he's funny like Frank, but not like he's not a jerk. But I was going to say, I mean, and we've been fortunate to do. I don't know if you know about this. We made a sequel/prequel spoken word album that came out in 2015 through TerraVision Records. So Paul replayed the character for of Frank for that. And we also used Paul. I shot a promo for TerraVision released the Unsolved Mysteries soundtrack, and we had Paul sort of be the stand-in for Robert Stack for the video promo.
In regards to, because you've mentioned the budget, and I'm beyond impressed with working on the budget, and I dare to say I feel like a lot, I mean, some of that must have come from, like you said, you weren't friends with him at the time, but you are now the Blair Witch creators. I mean, they did the same thing, right? They kind of really went for it with the low budget, and it exploded. I'm curious, when you're coming at the sequel, are you coming at it from the same direction? Are you going to approach it in a more kind of expansive budget?
Absolutely. Yeah. Without a doubt, it's be more money. And I mean, like, you know, the goal is to raise $50,000. And I'll tell you what that means, right? So there's a couple things here. WNUF, I mean, like, that was the hard cost, $1,500. If we had paid people, if we had, you know, like gotten through, like, you know, there's everything in there's, you know, license or it's royalty free or whatever, but there's things that we did because it was cheap and it could be forgivable. With the movie taking place in the 1990s and some of the portions being, man, you're getting some secrets out of me. Some of the portions of the sequel, it's more like, I mean, commercials in the 90s were more sophisticated, right? So we're going to need to invest more in sophistication. You know, there's some goals. I'd like to have some animated commercials in there, so that means probably, you know, higher costs for certain things. And I think the idea of doing some of the movie on basic cable rather than, you know, public or local TV, there's things that need to be a bit more sophisticated in production. So, like, you know, like I'm trying to raise $50,000 because it's going to show up on the screen more so. And there's also some of the special effects that will be needed are grander. So I'll tell you a little bit after we get off the podcast, a tiny bit of why that's going to be the case. But when you see the movie, you're going to understand. And there's some locations I'm going to need that are I'm going to have to pay rental costs. So, you know, and then also, like, I'm not just the money is not necessarily just paying for the movie. It's going to be paying for making, you know, VHS copies in bulk. It's going to be paid for the DVDs that we're going to make, that type of thing.
So my last question to you then is what is your time frame looking like for this showing up in people's mailboxes unexpectedly?
Sure. So to be totally honest with you, I probably think within 2 years. So it will be a decent chunk of waiting. The reason that is because some of the crowdsourced incentives are you can be in one of the commercials or you can say a line of dialogue in the film, and I need to know how much of that needs to be written into the movie. Like there is a structure to the story, and I know what I'm going to do with it, but like I need to know how many people are going to be used in which ways. I mean, to be totally honest, I've already produced, 5 of the commercials. We've been plugging away at them I've been pulling stock footage for the last year. So, I know what I'm doing with this, but this is the other cool thing. We shot the first WNUF script to screen in 9 months. I mean, it was done from idea to completion in 9 months. Now, granted, I was younger. I didn't have a house. My job was not really a career at that point. So I want to take my time knowing people are going to wait for it. I want to make sure I get it exactly how I want it. So that's why it's going to be a little bit longer.
Have a hunger for horror? A yen for Yelp yarns? Then give your blood-curdled bones a boon and tune in to Chronicles from the Crypt. Join sordid slime slingers Casualty Chris and Father Malone as they take on HBO's groundbreaking television series Tales from the Crypt. Here's what the rotting and rancid rabble are saying about Chronicles from the Crypt.
No!
Tune in to Chronicles from the Crypt. You have nothing to lose except your life.
Who is Carl Kolchak?
He's a reporter.
Now that is news, Vincenzo. News! And we are a news paper. We are supposed to print news, not suppress it.
With the INS.
What's an INS? Independent News Service, sir. Founded in 1904 by Enrico Paluzzi.
Who seems to have a...
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
The audio commentary. It's a dying art form, but here at One Track Mind, I, your wonky yet affable host Ryan Luis Rodriguez, analyze film through the prism of these embryonic forms of podcasting, one audio commentary at a time. Masterpieces, crapster pieces, live action, animation, cult classics, films literally no one has ever heard of. No track is too small and no track is too big. Join me and my guests from the entertainment world as we keep these features alive every other Tuesday. Hey, who else is going to discuss Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey one week and Citizen Kane the next? Us, that's who. Sure, you have to put up with my voice, but there's a certain give and take in this industry. That's One Track Mind, part of the Someone's Favorite Productions family and available wherever you get your podcasts.
Nose for the strange and unusual.
Well, last year in Las Vegas, I uncovered a series of murders that turned out to have been committed by a vampire.
And what is the Kolchak Tapes?
It's a podcast.
All about Carl Kolchak.
What's a Kolchak?
The Night Stalker.
And where can you get it?
On iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.kolchaktapes.com.
As foolish a game as any that Gory the Ghoul could make up.
Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
Week after week, I'm mesmerized by the focus given great films and questionable films alike. But every episode is a learning and entertaining experience.
This is hands down the best movie podcast. They cover so many different genres across so many years, from obscure movies to blockbusters.
If there's only one podcast about movies and cinema that you listen to, make it this one.
Projection Booth Podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
In 1985, a curious phenomenon occurred. The Twilight Zone returned to television, featuring all new tales of mystery and imagination from the minds of Ray Bradbury, Harlan Ellison, George R.R. Martin, and Stephen King. Dreams for Sale, the Twilight Zone 85 podcast looks back at that land of shadow and substance and re-examines the groundbreaking successor to Rod Serling's legacy. Featuring new interviews with the show's creators and cast, Dreams for Sale can be found on iTunes and at twilightzone85.com. Dreams for Sale. We'll be waiting for you in the Twilight Zone.
how did you get involved with acting, and transitioning then into getting cast in President's Day and then WNUF?
Oh, well, actually, I started out in college many years ago as an acting major, and but then one summer, I guess the first summer after freshman year, I was reading this article in the New York Times that said only 1 out of every 150 actors is ever working at any given point in time. And I'm thinking, gee, I think I want a family at some point, and that's probably a lot of moving around. Maybe this isn't the right thing for me. So I became a television major. Not that far different, but I became a television major, and this is like early 70s. This is exactly when HBO and MTV's happening and all that. And like one of my classmates became the producer for Letterman. Another one became like the vice president of comedy for HBO. But I chickened out and I went to law school. So, and I was in Black Sunday as an extra, like in the 70s, but never did anything else with it. But then later on, I started actually getting involved with ballet at the Kennedy Center. I'm a big ballet fan, and I met someone online that said, hey, when ballet companies come to town, they need like background extra people to sort of stand on stage with a sword or be a waiter. I said, oh, that sounds cool. So I started doing that. And one of those times I met another guy who happens to be a member of the Screen Actors Guild. And I said, yeah, I wish I would have gone into acting. It's too late now. And he said, no, it's not. It's not too late because they need actors of all ages and sizes and looks. And I said, what do I do? He says, well, contact these agencies, the casting people in the Washington, D.C. area. And I did, and I started getting background things, Flags of Our Fathers, Syriana, Veep, The Wire, that kind of stuff. And that's fun to do for a while, but after a while you think you want something bigger. So that's how, so I then started. There are a couple of things in D.C. area that, give you listings of, jobs coming up. And I started applying for independent films. And somehow I came across Chris LaMartina and auditioned, and he cast me in President's Day. Actually, I've done 5 movies with Chris. And I think WNUF was the third, I guess I did.
Let me ask you, obviously, since you have worked on, non-independent, quote-unquote, big-budget productions versus working on independent film, for you, which is more satisfying?
Well, no question, the independent stuff. I mean, being a background in, it's fun to see famous people on set and be part of it, but you don't have any lines, and it is acting to a degree, but it's not like, something like WNUF where for a majority of the movie, I'm sort of the main guy in it, and you get to speak, and with Chris, you get to, especially in NUF, a whole lot of ad-libbing and stuff and that kind of thing. So there's no question the independent stuff is much more satisfying.
Tell me a little bit about the kind of the trials and tribulations of getting the part of Frank Stewart in WNUF.
Well, I've done, some directors I've worked with, they'll hire me without an audition. Every time I've auditioned for Chris, even though he's worked with me a number of times, and I think it's fine, and I think he should do it. All right, Paul was good in this other thing, but can he really do this thing? But the audition for WNUF was interesting because it was like, sort of an improv thing. They said, okay, you're this reporter. Tell us the highlight of your career. So I don't know. I just off the cuff, I came up. Well, I said, I was a reporter, and I was working in Ohio, and there was a Ferris wheel that stalled. So the people were all stuck in the air, and I was assigned to go do the story, and I actually climbed up the Ferris wheel and interviewed people. And Chris and Jimmy, his co-producer, loved the story or whatever, but they hired me. And I think sort of because of that story I made up.
When I spoke with Chris about it, he said that you had initially gone in and it wasn't, it wasn't what kind of you had wanted it to be. And then you came back in and really kind of nailed it.
But I think if I nailed it, it was because of that story. Or, I forget the exact circumstances, but I remember them liking that sort of improv story I came up with.
Tell me a little bit about getting to work with Chris and creating the character of Frank Stewart, and kind of what were some influences that you drew from to kind of bring to your performance as the character?
Well, Chris, the whole thing with WNUF, it's sort of reminiscent of that thing that Geraldo Rivera did years ago with opening up Al Capone's safe. We're going into a place, into this house where there had been this murder committed, and we didn't know what we were going to find, if anything, and so, and he suggested that he wanted, a little bit of Geraldo Rivera. Not that I should be mimicking him or whatever, but he wanted sort of, a sort of a brash reporter, sort of quick on his feet and challenging people and that kind of thing. But that was the one thing he'd mention, was the Geraldo Rivera thing. But unlike, and Chris is, a very good a screenwriter, and he really normally likes things to be, if he wrote it a certain way, that's really sort of how he wants it. But this was a little different because there was a lot more ad-libbing, and he gave me sort of more freedom to play with the character a bit, which was fun.
So what did you bring to the role versus kind of the Geraldo expectation?
Well, I think there are several scenes that had a great deal of ad-libbing. There's a scene in front of the house where all these revelers or Halloween people are there. And, Chris said, ask a couple of questions and then just sort of, deal with them, and I did that. So I guess the ability to do that and pull it off is, I guess, what I brought to that. Because, there are other, actors or actresses that, I need exact lines. I can't, really go outside my comfort zone. And I did have to go outside of my comfort zone with this and just react to, I'd ask a question of one of the people outside, and then I had to come up with something to respond to them. And I think I did that okay. I think it came off okay. But it was fun to do. But I don't know if Chris mentioned to you that there's a whole bunch of commercials in that thing. Obviously, I had no idea. I had nothing to do with them, and those I think took longer to do than but we did all of my parts and all of the things in the house. We shot that in 3 days, and it was an intense 3 days. But it was good to sort of just flow together real quickly and do it all, and I think it made it more natural.
Yeah, so I am curious, kind of what was it like working on that really kind of amended schedule and on that set?
It was cool, but it was intense, and I have to admit that because there was so much going on and we were doing it in such a little amount of time, and the script was it's a full-length movie. They actually hooked me up with an earpiece. And Jimmy George, the co-producer, was actually on the other end of it in case I messed up my lines or in case I needed a prompt or something. However, I'm happy to say only once did I need it, in 3 days. I knew the lines enough, and he was standing by ready to feed me the line or whatever. But luckily, only once did I falter, and I needed Jimmy. But I'm glad he was there, and it was sort of a nice security thing, knowing that if I screwed up, that they could fix it quick.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
That's really impressive. I mean, I can't begin to imagine being on the set with that kind of time constraint, because it doesn't show in the film for sure. It doesn't seem like kind of a slapdash production. So,
and Chris is good at this. He knows what he wants, and he knows how to put it together and edit it to get what he wants. And what he wanted was, an 80s local newscast, and that's what he got. And that's what he wanted, with sort of a brash reporter who would talk back to people or kid around, and I even won a Best Supporting Actor award at Atlanta Horror Quest for my role as Frank Stewart, even though arguably, it was really a major actor role, not a supporting one. But apparently there was a guy in Atlanta who'd been nominated a bunch of times, and they wanted to honor him, so they gave him Best Actor, but they liked me so much, they gave me Best Supporting Actor. And I'm just very happy to be nominated, but yeah.
I mean, I'm going to level with you, the character of Frank Stewart really holds the film together and keeps it going. I mean, like you said, he is brash and kind of has some quips back and forth with the people outside and then, kind of the burgers and everyone else in the house and even his kind of news crew that's outside. And I like that back and forth because, like you said, it does kind of convey that sense of the 80s. And,
oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not like that anymore in some respects, which I think is kind of indicative of the era we live in. But I think, like you said, your personality and the kind of the character that you clearly embodied, it does really come through.
And the other thing is, you don't know whether he's really taking it seriously or not, because sometimes he does, and then later on, as things get serious, he clearly does, but he's sort of, playing with it a little bit at the beginning. But then, you don't really know where he sort of stands as to whether, this is a serious thing. Are they really going to find anything, or is it just something to do on Halloween? And it was an interesting character to play.
Well, because I always got the sense, and this was just me spitballing, that your character was complicit in kind of messing around with things on set to kind of get a reaction from some of the people, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, although I don't think that was the intent. No, it's good if if people have different, maybe he's messing with this, maybe maybe one of his guys did kill the cat or whatever. But, no, there wasn't any feeling like that, all right, let's, Chris didn't say, all right, let's make this sort of ambiguous where it's not clear if you're really part of it. No, there was none of that, though.
Right. That's what I figured. Like I said, I didn't get that sense from Chris, but again, I think that works in the film's favor because, like you said, he doesn't seem to be taking it entirely seriously at the beginning.
Right.
And then later on, obviously, it really kind of ramps up and the horror aspect takes over versus kind of the comedic aspect of the film.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's talk a little bit about that transition from kind of comedy to horror in the film. When the tension does start kind of ramping up later in the film, kind of what was that like working in that kind of the last 30 minutes of your part of the film and kind of having to do working with some of the practical effects and some of the stuff that ends up going on in the house?
Well, it was much more intense because, I didn't have anything to do with like the cat and that.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times. Or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months. Or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
And I started getting, as the character started getting actually scared, which was a whole different, tenor from the earlier part of the film, where I'm, sort of joking around and kidding around and, let's go into the house and see what's there and the priest and all that. But then, someone killed the cat, and I know my people didn't kill the cat. So then something else is really going on, and then going downstairs with the priest and all that. That was pretty intense, and it required, a different approach to the whole thing. Because I'm scared at that point, and I don't know what to do. And things are happening, and I don't have control of them, and I'm sort of scared.
Well, and again, I mean, it comes through because there is that tonal shift towards the end of the film where your character essentially makes a 180 and stops joking around. And I think that, it shows kind of the quality of Chris's screenwriting and the quality of your acting that you're welcome, right. It's believable, and that's the thing that I think could have gotten lost is that your character is believable throughout, and you kind of follow your character on that journey from, the smart ass to,
scared ass, yeah.
Yeah, scared ass. Yeah.
No, but it was a fun movie to do, and apparently the reaction's been good, and they actually continue to show it at festivals, or it's actually going to be shown in Virginia on Halloween. And I've never had a chance to see it in a theater. I've got the DVD, but I didn't get a chance to go to the premiere of it in Baltimore because I was filming another movie that ran late, and I can't believe I couldn't go to it. But I've never seen it in a theater, but I'm going to get to do that like in a month.
But have you seen it on VHS? That's the real question.
Oh, sure, yeah, and I've seen it on. I have one of the copies, the handwritten VHS labels, and I have the DVD.
What's your reaction to the reaction that you've heard about the film, and kind of what's your response to the way people have received the film and your performance in the film?
Well, the thing that's nice about it is there's occasion every year, to see it because it's so tied into Halloween. So every year there are, it seems, there are like articles on Google about it from different, I guess, horror sites and that kind of thing. I think there was even like what Halloween movie should you watch this year? And they recommend WNUF, even though it's 4 years old or whatever at the time. And there have been some. The other independent films I'm in really don't get reviewed like the horror world reviews films. And, it's very nice to see these very positive comments that people have made over the last 4 years. And, some of them didn't come up for a couple of years where someone reviewed it and really liked it or liked my performance or whatever and recommends it as being, and then there's some people that talk about every year it's a tradition of theirs to watch WNUF on Halloween. And that's really nice to know that there's some people out there that not only appreciated it when it came out, but continue to appreciate it.
And have made it part of their yearly tradition.
Yes. I'm like part of the family. It's true. No, it's a very cool thing.
So I wanted to ask you about something that was brought to my attention when I spoke with Chris, and it was something I didn't know about. The vinyl that was put out.
The what?
The vinyl.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know about it, but I wanted to ask you about coming back to play Frank once again for a spoken word entry into the Frank Stewart experience, as it were.
I'm looking at the album right now, actually. No, it was very cool, and I get to put on my resume that I did a spoken word recording, which is cool. But no, so one side of the album is me doing other stories. The other side of the album are the burgers, and to be honest, I haven't listened to that side yet. I'm sorry, but no, it was cool to be able to sort of something that I thought was done with being able to sort of recreate that character in a different not venue or whatever you'd call it, in a different medium. So that was very cool, revisiting one of the my most favorite characters. So that was very cool doing that.
All right, we are back. Big thanks to Chris LaMartina and Paul Fahrenkopf for sitting down and talking with me. Let's finish up talking about WNUF Halloween Special. So from here on out, we're going to talk spoilers. If you haven't seen the film yet, please go watch it. It is fantastic. And if you do like it, go support Chris LaMartina right now. He has a GoFundMe page for the sequel. The sequel is going to be set in the 90s. He's been doing a hell of a lot of self-promotion on Facebook for it. It's independent film, folks. You got to hustle every day if you want to get this made. So hats off to him. Please go check that out. He's been doing a hell of a lot of stuff. He's been releasing some kind of extra footage that he shot, which if you're a fan of WNUF, you probably want to eat that up as quickly as you can. So, like I said, though, from here on out, spoilers. So, Mike, I'm curious, what did you think of kind of the big twist at the end of the film?
I actually didn't see it coming, so I was very happy about that. I like that you get introduced to these nut jobs who are all against Halloween, and that plays so perfectly into the satanic panic of the 1980s that you get those folks. And I mean, they seem like they could easily be friends with the people that we talked about from Jesus Camp, the woman who is so against Harry Potter, and you don't teach about warlocks, they are not heroes and stuff, and orange and black are the devil's colors. So I really, it was nice that they interrupted the call-in session. It was nice that they interrupted the man on the street interviews that Frank is doing at one point. And yeah, when it ended up being them in the house, that really worked well for me because I honestly did not see that coming.
Well, that's, I mean, again, you're completely right. When I watched it the first time, I did not see it coming either. I honestly was expecting something a little bit more along the lines of there's an episode of Tales from the Crypt that's kind of similar to this. It's called like Television Terror, I think, and it's got Morton Downey Jr. in it.
Oh,
and I just expected Frank Stewart's character to just get killed by a ghost, or like you weren't sure what it was. But again, all the credit to Chris LaMartina and Paul Fahrenkopf for going the extra mile at the end of the film to really give us something that breaks with the comedic value of, because this movie's pretty funny. You know, there's a lot of parts of this movie that are pretty quotable. The commercials are pretty over the top. French jets and makeup and the fucking Frumpkus wine coolers is probably my favorite ad in the entire movie. But then you have this really horrific ending. And the really interesting twist is that this copy of the VHS that you're watching is the killer's VHS tape.
Right.
And that's such a cool idea and a novel idea for how to do a found footage ending. I mean, I'm sure it's not like completely original, but that doesn't mean anything when it's executed so well.
Yeah, and the thing you were talking about, this is independent film, and when you realize, I think he says on the commentary it was shot for what, $1,500 total, and it's like, this movie was so much more effective to me than something, and I'm going to offend people, but something like VHS and VHS 2. I could give a shit about those movies, and I will never go back to those pieces of trash. But this, so much more effective, and you know the budgets on those were so much more. And they probably had the digital effects and all this kind of garbage. And for movies called VHS, they didn't look like they were VHS. People would put VHS tapes into a VCR and then were allegedly watching what's on those tapes. They didn't look anything like VHS tapes, whereas this had that authenticity, that he ran this stuff through VCRs multiple times to downgrade the actual video quality, the quality of the footage at the end when they're cutting off his tongue. I mean, that stuff is so rough, but it's perfect for it.
Yeah, it's rough, but like you said, in a way that really sells it. And that's kind of the big takeaway that I kind of have with WNUF is that when you go the extra mile to really give the audience a sense of time and place, if it works well, you essentially can do no wrong. And that's the huge takeaway here is, I mean, if the ending had been kind of, generic and straightforward, I still would love it. But with the ending having this kind of really grisly twist, I love it even more because, again, like you said, it really works out the kinks of what it means to be a VHS tape. And it goes the extra distance to, even if you're just watching it on Shudder or you're watching a VOD copy of it on Amazon Prime on an HD TV, it still is only 4:3. It's still as grainy as hell. And it sells itself completely. And yes, watching it on VHS in my mind is the optimal way to do it because there's something to be said for watching this on VHS, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't even imagine, like, popping the tape into the machine, hearing it unspool, and then having that come up as the image. It felt wrong watching this through a streaming service and seeing, like having it go back to the menu at the end. It was like, no, this should just play out as the rest of the tape and there's nothing on it. Like to the point where if this was on VHS, I would be fast forwarding all the way to the end until it finally chunked and rewound itself because I'd still be looking for like more images. Did they record more onto this tape later on? Like give me more clues. It's kind of like you mentioned Cloverfield and the whole idea of like how the video goes back at the end because they were recording over somebody else's tape. It's like watching that, like you get this major clue of like, oh, you saw the creature splash down. I would have been doing the exact same thing with this and it would have felt much more authentic.
The sad thing about mentioning this film and Cloverfield in the same sentence is this film is superior to Cloverfield in every way, and it feels almost like doing this film a disservice to mention such an overhyped piece of trash.
Well, they have the Ed and Lorraine Warren analogs in this movie, and then they have them being portrayed in all of the Conjuring films, the Annabelle series, all that kind of stuff. And it's like I was much more on the edge of my seat watching WNUF than I was watching any of those Conjuring films. And, I paid for the whole seat, but I only needed the edge.
That's right. That's what they say in that commercial.
Yes.
And again, like we've said, and this is something that I think really works in its favor, like you mentioned with the commercials. They don't feel overdone.
No, because having had experience, I know how freaking crazy they can get. So that commercial for the Quarry, the rock music show, that was fucking perfect, man. That was wonderful, because I've seen commercials exactly like that when I was working at Comcast, and there was a guy there, this like 500-pound super long hair rock and roller dude who went by the name of Mr. Bubbles, and he made a commercial for his band, playing at this local club, and it was almost exactly the same. All the cheesy video effects, all this kind of stuff, the over-the-top VO, the rock and roll music. Mr. Bubbles could have been part of WNUF Halloween Special, but having the Quarry there as this, counterpart to it, I was like, okay, yeah, they were so right on with so many of these commercials. That stupid carpet commercial that they show multiple times, and the whole idea of, the sponsors buying multiple spots for the same, little bit of time period. I mean, it's the same now when you're watching on demand, but watching shows back then, you would see those same things over and over again. I'm surprised there weren't more lawyer commercials. The politician, especially watching this right now, and I know that on the audio commentary, Chris is constantly saying, like, I hope you're watching this around Halloween. I hope you're watching this around Halloween. Watching this in an election year and seeing all those political commercials, it was so effective. It kind of turned my stomach, because I'm so, done with political commercials, but they hit perfectly.
And if they want to talk about his infidelity, I'm all for it. It was such a prick, but again, it hits all those notes of kind of what I expect when I watch something from that time and place.
Exactly.
And also credit to Chris not being the one who did all the commercials.
It sounded like he ended up doing too many of them.
Well, what I mean is, not being the one who made all of them.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, using all the pre-existing footage, getting stuff from J.R. Bookwalter and other folks, and then he was talking about his editor. I don't know how Final Cut Pro works.
You won't see the engineer that slams the Nissan Rogue's door 13,920 times, or the corrosive chamber that simulates 15 years of life in 5 months, or the Rogue heat-baked for over 300 combined hours. What you will see is a vehicle that can take punch after punch and keep rolling. Nissan, #1 in new vehicle quality among mainstream brands by J.D. Power. We put it through the worst, so you get its best. For J.D. Power 2025 U.S. Initial Quality Study Award information, visit jdpower.com/awards. Awards based on 2025 model year. Newer models may be shown.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
But he was saying that she made all of these playlists of different themes, and then they were able to pull all that stuff together. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's really kind of smart. So then they would just have all of these things. And I know he said in the commentary that some people say that the shot of the Twin Towers is over the top, but you don't think about that stuff in 1987. You're just going to put a shot of the Twin Towers in it. So I thought that was really effective as well in the Epsilon Air commercial.
Well, again, it just goes to show kind of how far you're willing to go to sell what you're showing.
Exactly.
And again, it's not an issue then. I mean, again, now everybody getting all bent out of shape, but, there's a couple different directors and writers for some of the commercials, like the Parents Against Partying or the Stay Sure tampons, which I think is one of the more effective, subtly effective ones, because it feels just pitch perfect in every way. But like I said, my favorite one is still the Frumpkus wine coolers, because it's just the idea that anyone is selling wine cooler in this glass bottle that looks like something out of Dracula's Crypt, knowing that we have Boone Farm now that's just like the lowest bottom garbagey shit that you can drink, but they're trying to make it be this like really grand thing. I think it's just the funniest thing ever. And again, I think that's probably my favorite ad, but they're also pitch perfect and tonally consistent throughout, that not one sticks out as like, well, that one was weaker than the others, because it doesn't seem like it'd be from 1987.
Right. I mean, I personally would have liked to have seen more of the promo for Straight A's, the show that they were promoting at one point. I was kind of sad that they fast forwarded through the end of that, but it just, again, it hits. And the TV show promos I thought were so well done as well, and some of those crazy names for them like Chicago Lightning and stuff, it's like, wow, that fits well. And yeah, it's close to Miami Vice, but it's not to the point where you're like groaning inside like, oh, that's too similar. They separated stuff out enough where you weren't thinking like this is a direct ripoff. And if you're watching shows on, your local UHF channel, yeah, they had analogs for everything. It was like, here's the low rent version of, I don't know, the A Team or something. If they called it the B Team, that would be a little too close. But if they called it like X-Force Alpha Exelon or something like that, who knows? That commercial for the sci-fi show, that was fantastic as well, with those like those crazy great graphics and like the bird of prey, the Klingon bird of prey in there. It was so good.
And the Laser Brigade.
Yes.
My favorite is the fake movie that they talk about, The Mummy. Oh my God. That's again, it's just, it works so well because it feels like, that could be a real thing.
And that they're switching like quality of video inside some of those and quality of footage. So like that movie Doggone It, I was like, okay, that looks like it might have been shot on film at some point. That was so well done. And it was so smart the way that he gathered all that footage and just was able to reuse those things. I mean, that he was recycling himself so often, and just like not holding his own stuff sacred and being like, oh, there's a shot of a mummy. Cool. I get to use that.
Right. So I'm curious kind of what you think about like the overall kind of way that this film kind of works in the scheme of found footage. In your mind, because again, we talked a little bit about this on Ghostwatch, is this in the kind of the top tier of the found footage horror films, reality horror films that you've seen?
For me, yeah, I would definitely put that in there. I mean, I might not have seen as many as I probably should, but I think I've seen a fair enough amount. Like for a while, I was very into found footage films and trying to see as many as I could, but then after a while it just got to be too big. There were way too many, because for a little bit it was like a novelty, and you're like, oh,
well,
cool.
In 2014 they released 21. As we talked about on our Taking of Deborah Logan podcast, which came out in 2014, 21 found footage films came out in 2014, which is insane.
And then you had found footage on television, found footage, like on episodic stuff, found footage, TV movies. So yeah, it became too big of a mountain for me to climb. So I will not say that I'm any sort of expert when it comes to found footage stuff, but as far as what I've experienced, this is one of the best.
Yeah, and again, I think that a lot of the credit goes to Chris and his smart script and the committing fully to what you're trying to achieve, having this idea in your head from the get-go that I want this to be a broadcast from public access, a local cable, not even cable, a local channel that you could pick up over the air. And this happened on Halloween, really unassuming. And because of the twist at the end, nobody knows what happens to the people, but the audience who's watching does. And I think that it's just when you put all those pieces together with the commercials, with the performances, with everyone committing, with at the beginning there being like actual like news broadcasts about the guy who shoots the little Asian kid because he has PTSD. I mean, it's going out of your way to really sell something. And because he went out of his way to do it, you get this really kind of like perfect little piece of found footage, horror, comedy entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing that I talked about too on Ghostwatch, is all those times where I think to myself, how is this working? You know, like I mentioned VHS earlier, and it's like, well, who cut these tapes? Who did this? And in here, you don't get that directly. You get that inferred, but it's perfect the way that it's inferred, and it just really pushes you into that way rather than you sitting there going, well, that doesn't make sense. And just that it has this, it's got the rhythm to it, and it's got the whole idea of this is a broadcast rather than, you know, this has been lost at the side of the road or something. So it works really well.
I would say that this movie being as good as it is, it walked a very narrow line. And it was, I mean, on either side of you could have been a failure in one direction or another. And it's kind of a miracle that this is as good as it is. Because, like you said, it could have fallen into any of the traps that we've seen found footage fall into. And I think that little twist at the end, with you finding out that this is the VHS tape of the Harvest psychos who killed Frank Stewart, I think that's just like an absolute stroke of genius. Would this still be, in my mind, 5 out of 5 without it? Depends on how it ended, but probably. But with that little stroke of genius, that little kind of stinger right at the end, it really pushes it into just this like weird area in my mind where it's like, this is one of those things I could just kind of put on in the background, leave it on, and I won't get bored of it, because it's every time I've watched it, I pick up on something different. And I think for something like this, that's a testament to the quality and the craftsmanship of the people behind it. So Mike, what would you give the WNUF Halloween Special out of 5?
I would probably give this 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I would give it a 5, a solid 5 out of 5, and I haven't given out very many 5s this year because we haven't watched a lot of really good stuff. I mean, we'd watched good stuff, but horror movie-wise, up until October, you know, The Strangers, Pray at Night, pretty bad. The Nun, pretty bad. So finally getting to share these movies that I've been really excited to share with kind of the podcast audience like WNUF or Ghost Watch. I think this has been a really fun month, and I'm glad that you got to watch this, Mike, because I feel like you of all people really appreciated this.
Well, yeah, I'm really glad that you invited me on this episode. And like I said, I just completely flew under my radar. So I'm glad that you pointed it out, made me watch it, because I feel like I'm a better person for it.
Well, that's not a bad thing. So, well, let's take another break and we'll play a preview for the next Kulturecast.
At the beginning, she gave me things. Perfect balance. Perfect sleep. Oh, she wants to get inside of me. I can feel her. Oh, she can see me.
When you dance the dance of another, you make yourself in the image of its creator.
I feel like I'm not even here yet. The dumpling's incredible. 1, 2, 3. The way she transmits her work.
You have to decide, what is it you want to be for this company?
There's more in that building than what you can see, Doctor.
You are living with dangerous people. Three mothers, pre-God, pre-devil. Mother Tenebrarum, Mother Lacrimarum, and Mother Suspiriorum. Darkness, tears, and sighs. You're making some kind of deal with them.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's all a mess. The one out there. The one in here. The one that's coming.
That's right. On the next Kulturecast, we're going to be talking about another horror movie. We're going to be continuing horror movies through November. We're going to be talking about some Italian horror films in November, and we're going to start the month with a look at Suspiria 2018, the remake that's being lauded as the best fucking thing ever made in the history of horror movies. Just like every other horror movie that's made by a indie studio and gets public attention from the mainstream. So I'm pretty reserved about Suspiria 2018, if you can't tell, and I think that that's probably not a bad thing. So, but did you know Tilda Swinton plays a guy in the movie?
She plays multiple roles.
Whoa, fucking crazy. It's like Eddie Murphy in Nutty Professor. Jesus Christ. But until then, where can people find you, Mr. White?
They can find me with you over at the Kolchak Tapes at kolchaktapes.com, where we talk about episodes of the Night Stalker, both 1970s version and the early 2000s version. And you can also find me over at my podcast, The Projection Booth, which is at projectionboothpodcast.com. And if you can't get enough of me, you can also hear more of Chris and I over at Dreams for Sale, which is the Twilight Zone 85 podcast, which you can find at twilightzone85.com.
Let's just say that Mike and I must really like one another. Or we do have like that, the Penn and Teller relationship where we like working together but don't really care about one another outside of work. Is that what this is?
I don't know. I'd like to think that it's a little bit more than that.
I would too, because that's just always been weird to me when Penn Jillette's like, yeah, I don't think Teller and I have ever had dinner together. I'm like, what?
That's weird.
That's fucking, I mean, like, kudos on them, a working relationship that's made them millions upon millions of dollars, but it's like, it kind of takes like the luster off it, like the same thing. I've been watching a lot of Mythbusters, that it's like those guys apparently can't stand one another.
Well, that
like
comes through on the show.
Yeah, but I mean, on the show, it always feels more like a put on, and then when you find out it's real, you're just like, oh, really? So, but my relationship with Mr. Mike White is not that. Mike and I have met in person, and it was I consider him a good friend. So but we do have a lot of podcasts, too many podcasts. So, you can follow me on Twitter at Kulturestash. Like Mike said, Kolchak Tapes, Dreams for Sale. I have another podcast I do with my good buddy Mike Wallace, aka Father Malone, where we talk about Tales from the Crypt once every 2 weeks, twice a month. That's called Chronicles from the Crypt. You can check that one out as well. Head on over to Kulturecast.com where you can find out more about today's episode. You'll find links over to iTunes where you can rate and review the show, and to Patreon where you can kick a couple dollars our way. If you want to, great. If not, I don't know, go support somebody's WNUF sequel. The money would go just about as far there as it would with us. You're supporting independent folks one way or another, so go ahead and do that. Big thanks as always to Eric for his intro-outro music, and we'll catch you on the next Kulturecast.